Peace and welcome to the Edible Activist Podcast. I am your host and favorite edible activist, Melissa L. Jones. I am super excited because I have a returning guest with me here today, LaMonika Jones, who is the director of DC Hunger Solutions. She visited us a few episodes ago, episode 146 to be correct. And last time we introduced LaMonika Jones as the new director at DC Hunger Solutions. We also learned about her journey combating hunger in Washington, D.C., while she also placed a strong emphasis on avoiding silos in food and advocating for a comprehensive system approach. We also explored the intersection of agriculture and LaMonika's ambitious agenda, connecting the dots between activism, agriculture, and the pursuit of ending hunger in Washington, D.C. She also answered a very heavy question of mine of, can we really end hunger in DC? And she had some really great responses. So I want to welcome you back, LaMonika. Thanks for joining me again.
Thanks for having me, Melissa. I appreciate it. It's always good to be back.
Awesome. And y'all can't see. Well, maybe you'll see on my Instagram. She's popping over here with this beautiful blouse, okay? So I'm just going to, every time I look at her, I'm going to look at the blouse.
I had to put on some color for the nice weather that we're having today.
Absolutely. Well, I am thrilled that you decided to join me back. Anybody who, accepts my invitation and come back, I think they like me. They like the vibe. They like the show. But most importantly, I learned so much from you during our last episode, LaMonika, and I said I have to invite her back because you were just a book, just teaching me and really educating the audience on hunger solutions in DC and the agenda that has been put forth before you. So how has it been? Are you past 90 days? Way past 90 days?
Yes.
Okay. She said yes. Probably feels like it.
Yes. We are past the 90-day mark. Yes, I think I met my quota. So we in there. We good. We're good.
Well, I also have to say thank you for attending my most recent live podcast event that I did here at the end of March.
Amazing.
Thank you.
It was so amazing.
I appreciate your support.
Some good work came out of that. I was asked to be part of an advisory board by one of your attendees.
Oh my God.
Yes.
See y'all. I promise if there was someone, I don't know, an elf or someone, an angel, someone just really mapping the connections that come out of these conversations and these experiences and gatherings, I would just be amazed. So
this is definitely pun intended, but this is good ground. And the seed that was sown that day in the form of your podcast planted something. We had maybe an hour-long meeting with her and her director.
It's so incredible.
And we talked about just Black farmers, food systems. We shared a little bit about ourselves, just how we wanted to work together as an organization. And checking my emails last week, found out she reached out to me and said, we are putting together an advisory board that is going to work on specific issues with our farmers and our growers and with food access. And we really want you to be a part of the advisory board that leads the charge in DC. And in all of the emails, that was probably the last one that I read on Friday. And I was like, oh my gosh.
Wow.
And so that came out of a result of being planted here and the seeds that you have planted. So I owe you a thank you.
Oh my.
For that.
I don't know what to say. Show's over, LaMonika. Mic drop.
If there was ever a question about your why, you have it.
Oh my
You have
goodness.
your answer.
Oh my gosh.
You have your answer.
I am blushing. I'm trying not to cry. And I am grateful. I am grateful. So for those who don't know, and this show is about LaMonika, y'all, but just so that we can catch you up to speed, I hosted a live podcast event at the end of March as an ode to celebrating Black women growers, farmers, and food activists. And so something that I just want Black women who I wanted to continue to pour in. So I kicked off March. March is Women's History Month, and so I wanted to have this great experience and interviewed a phenomenal farmer by the name of Fulani Spivey, who is the owner of Bird's Nest Box. And so I jammed about 30 to almost 40, guests in this studio. We had a dynamic time, and there were a lot of connections made. And so that makes me feel so special.
You should, as you should.
Thank you. All right, LaMonika. Well, since our last discussion, I just ran down some of the things that we talked about, but you all please go check out episode 146 with LaMonika. Definitely want to, I know there's been a lot happening since you were in the studio. I be all up in your LinkedIn post too, just FYI. Out of all my LinkedIn connections, like you're like one of my favorites. Just want to say.
Thank you.
I love seeing your posts, but I want to celebrate some of your victories at DC Hunger Solutions since you've been there. I know there have been a couple initiatives and things that have progressed, more specifically with Hear the Crunch and Give SNAP a Raise. Mm-hmm. But if there are others too, I definitely just want to spend a few moments just celebrating some of the victories and some other victories that you all are in pursuit of in combating hunger in the nation's capital.
Yeah, so I'll just kind of run down that list. With Hear the Crunch, that's an annual celebration that we've been doing for, I'm not sure how many years, we've been doing it for quite a while. We do it along with in partnership with our sister organization, Maryland Hunger Solutions, which we pick a day, typically it's school breakfast week, and we encourage all of our schools that participate in the National School Lunch Program to bite out of an apple in celebration of healthy school meals and in school breakfast. And so this year we made it a whole event with one of our DC public schools, and with all the phenomenal kids. I have to pull up the name of the school because I can't remember it off the top of my head. But we made it a partnership with, it was DC Hunger Solutions, OSSI, Food Corps, I believe DC Food Policy Council participated in this as well. We also always have tremendous support from DC council members. And so if you go on Twitter or Instagram, you'll see all of our DC council members taking a bite out of their apple in support for Hear the Crunch. And so it's always phenomenal to spend time with little ones in the morning.
Yes.
And they all came up, and they don't know me from a teacher that they've never seen before, but we got so many hugs. Aww. And random conversations, thank you, come back. I had one little boy said, why does everyone that comes to visit, why are they always so tall? And I was going to say, probably also 30 years older than you too.
Exactly. Did anyone run up and show you like their bitten apple?
I keep telling this story, but the funniest thing was these are 5 and 6 year olds, and so they've lost their front teeth. So to see this apple and to see all these kindergartners and first graders try to bite this apple with the side of their mouth because they couldn't bite it in the front is the funniest thing. And then for them to try it and realize this is too hard, and then to chuck the apple in the trash can and say, I want some apple slices. Like, those are too hard to eat. I prefer apple slices. It's the funniest thing. But it's just like they tried it.
Yeah.
Some of them devoured it and said, can I have another apple?
I love it.
And so there was also breakfast parfaits that day. There was an egg frittata, I believe, that the school had made. And so all the apples came from a locally grown farmer.
Awesome.
I believe out of Virginia this year. And so, it was just an amazing time to celebrate school breakfast and to interact with the students, and then to take a tour to see all the work that's going on in this particular school around healthy eating, and then also promote universal school meals, a part of that as well. So that was the first thing. But prior to that, we had Give SNAP a Raise.
Yes. Which was a fight. And still a fight.
Woosah.
It's not funny, but it's not funny at all, but it is a fight.
It is definitely a fight, and I'm definitely grateful to Councilmember Henderson, as she's the one who introduced the legislation, to Councilmember Janice Lewis George for the excess revenue amendment, which funded Give SNAP a Raise. And then all of the council members that supported. We had, I believe, Councilmember Robert White co-sponsored it, but all of our council members were in support of it. So really thankful for their support, and then understanding the need for Give SNAP a Raise for that additional 10% that district residents receive, especially after the ending of our SNAP emergency allotments and the support our older adults needed in the district. So really grateful to DC Council. Unfortunately, it was just a whirlwind. I didn't imagine that I would be spending my holiday break having to go back and forth about benefit adequacy and the need to fund legislation that was already signed and passed, and funding was already moved over and allocated. I didn't imagine that I would spend my holiday, having to essentially fight again for something that we're fighting for the past 2 years. Didn't think that I would be the day that would be how I would spend my winter break, nor did I think that that would be what we would come back to in January is this storm of sorts. But we are grateful that the administration did relent, and that district residents did begin to receive their benefits, I believe. I think starting the end of January or February the 1st.
Okay.
It was the end of February, because February they got January and February, and then March they were on track to receive March. So I believe it was the end of February that benefits were dispersed. Unfortunately, funding only goes through September 30th.
Right.
So unless DC Council passes funding for the benefits starting October 1, then we will see a lapse in that additional dollar amount. They won't see any benefits for Give SNAP a Raise come October 1.
Was there a higher percentage that you all were fighting for, or was it just the 10%?
No, the legislation was always that district residents would receive 10% in addition to their federal maximum allotment.
Okay.
That was the way the legislation was written.
Got it.
But it was always a high dollar amount. So I believe, off the top of my head, $59 million. I think it was 59. It was somewhere around there. And so there was a portion of it that was allocated to DHS for technology upgrades, because this would be kind of classified as a new program. And so they needed District Direct, which is the system that DC Healthcare Finance oversees to make sure that they distribute benefits to participants. There needed to be some tech upgrades for that. And then, $52 million was the ask. And then the additional $51 million, it was like 50.8 million, would be allocated in benefits to district residents. And so it was always a high price tag, and that was a lot of the issue with why it wasn't funded in years prior. Councilmember Henderson introduced legislation in 2021 as a result of the pandemic. But because it was so high, it wasn't funded. But fortunately enough, in 2023 or 22, it was passed. And so.
Okay. Thank you for breaking that down, because when I hear 10%, to me, it doesn't sound like a lot. But when you're talking about the larger pot,
it's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. If you look at it this way, we're talking 10% per, an estimated 10%. That's dependent on your household size and your income. That varies for a lot of different people.
Absolutely.
As long as you are within those income guidelines for SNAP eligibility. So that could vary, but that's per person. So you'd have to take that total per household and then add that up. And then that's what you would essentially get for how much an individual was receiving. So, I mean, a parent, and this is me not knowing any numbers off the top of my head, but a parent could be receiving $293 in SNAP benefits. Now, is that enough by any means for a family of 3 to go grocery shopping? Not at all.
Yeah.
But in terms of SNAP benefits, that additional 10% especially for our older adults, was the difference between me being able to pay my rent, because the rent eats first, me being able to pay my rent and then afford groceries, especially maybe healthier foods, because I'm trying to reverse maybe some high blood pressure.
Absolutely.
So I'm moving away from processed foods and need to have a more fresh whole foods as part of my diet. And so that additional 10% is the difference between me being able to treat a diet-related disease or a chronic illness that I have, in addition to trying to pay my rent on a fixed income, knowing that my Social Security counts against me as an older adult receiving SNAP. So for some, it may not seem like a lot.
Yeah. I see.
And then if you
This is why I bring LaMonika back. When I tell you she breaks this stuff down.
It's the only way you understand. I had a conversation earlier this morning and we talked about it. We said the only way to make people, you got to dial it down so that people understand. These are the things that they don't have time to do this.
Yeah.
Typically on the news, they can't break this. And we're going to give you high level stuff.
Not at all.
Because just of time, not that it's not important, but we just don't have the capability or capacity to break this down. But that's why these types of conversations are important, so people understand, well, what did this look like and how did this come into play and what are the conversations, and not just siloing ourselves. The answer or the issue is not just food. We have to factor in
Economics.
what other bills do I have to pay?
Housing.
Taxes.
Taxes. Oh,
Taxes.
God.
Taxes. And we look at our paycheck every 2 weeks, every month, however we're paid. Before you get to see your money, taxes are taken out. Where are my
Lots of them.
Lots of them. Where are my taxes going?
I have never been so much concerned about how my taxes are being applied until my older adult age. And then everything just came into play. Okay?
You understand,
I understand. I'm like, policy, all right. Legislation,
that's where
I
it
get
is. We talk about revenue raisers. We talk about taxes. You know, if you're going to raise my taxes, and taxes and revenue raisers are the same thing. If we're talking about taxes, then those tax dollars need to point to something.
Point to something. Tell me where my money is going.
I will never forget. I won't tell you where I lived at the time. But I remember at the end of the budget, at the end of the session, there was, I wasn't living in D.C. I'll just say that. I was not living in D.C. Since everyone can wipe their brow, was not living in D.C. This is not the District of Columbia or Maryland or anywhere in the Mid-Atlantic. But it was the end of session, and there was excess funds in the budget that needed to be spent down. And I can remember being so upset because these excess funds had the ability to be allocated to special interests, to schools, just wherever the need was.
Right.
Lobbyists stepped in, and instead of funding schools, and at the time I think the need was not just schools, but particularly school cafeterias. Instead of funding school meals and school cafeterias, the funding went to, I believe it was alcohol sales is where this funding went to. And I said, and for me, my brain clicked, and that's where the lobbyist part, that was where me really understanding what happens when you lobby, really understanding that if we're just looking at school lunch, for example, there are people that are lobbying for your students or your children to have more produce and fruits and vegetables on their menu, and that there are those that are advocating to have more processed foods on your school menu. And whoever is able to do the best, for lack of better words.
Winner, chicken dinner.
And that kind of understanding where our taxes go, how our money is allocated, making sure that we're holding leaders accountable for their spending.
Making sure that we are holding leaders accountable for their spending. Ding, 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 dong, ding.
I shared with the group this morning that I just forgot my train of thought. I hate when that happens.
That's okay. It'll come back.
I hate when
It'll
that
come
happens.
back. One thing that I should have done before we dived into Give Snap a Raise, which, again, we're going to celebrate the victory. I do understand at what I guess would be the end of the fiscal year. It will obviously likely be another fight for additional funding.
We're going at
or
it.
in it right now.
We're in it right now. We're in it right now.
Because when you think about it, we're only a few months away. So
we are.
Yeah.
There's the last budget hearing for the season before committee markups begin is Friday. And so that is slated to
Wow.
be a marathon budget hearing because of how many human service needs funding was cut from.
Goodness gracious.
Was cut from the budget. We had the pay equity fund that was cut.
Yeah.
We had ERAP housing that was cut. We had the urban ag funding that was cut.
Yeah.
Give Snap a Raise was cut.
Yeah.
The good thing is that a lot of the DC health programs, so Produce Plus, those items remained. They kept them at the same on par. So there's no lack of funding there. When I checked in with DCPS, as far as they were concerned, there was no loss in funding for school nutrition.
Okay.
So those things remain the same. But a lot of our other human services programs, school behavioral health was cut.
Goodness gracious.
And these are the things that we advocate for on behalf of our work through Fair Budget, as well as our own policy priorities. So, yeah, it's pretty difficult when we understand that revenue raisers and raising money in the district is important, that, we have to have a balanced budget that also increases income, but also supports our residents. But when you have a high number of residents in need, at what point do we begin to prioritize that and realize, we really need to support our older adults, if anything.
Absolutely.
Our older adults.
Yes.
And then maybe put more funding towards how can we build up workforce development? How can we pay higher wage jobs? Things that will make employment enticing for those in the district, so that, you can spend more money here. Leisure and travel, I believe, is DC's #1 economy. So how can we make that more attractive? What can we do? But the people that are being impacted the most are those that rely on our federal nutrition programs, and we can't promote the stigma that SNAP doesn't work. I don't think the goal is for anyone to be on SNAP forever.
Right. Right.
But as I keep reminding people, we are one healthcare crisis. We are one layoff. We are one more pandemic away from having to rely on SNAP,
Absolutely.
TFAP. Our economy, our population keeps aging. So that means that there's going to be more folks eligible for Medicaid,
Right.
Medicare. So I just looked at a doctor bill the other day, not for me, but it was $600,000. And the Medicare portion, after the Medicare had been taken care of, the remaining balance was only, I think, under $800. There are people that physically can't afford to work and that need the care.
Absolutely.
And as our economy, as our population ages, and if we're not introducing healthy eating, and as more diet-related diseases come into play, we're really going to have to offset that, and not just let's treat the disease or the illness,
Right.
but let's teach people how to cook their food, nourish themselves, so that they're not reliant on medication and
Right.
things. But
Yeah.
again, that's a different conversation.
I know.
Because
I know.
the pharmaceutical.
Yeah.
That's a whole thing. So yeah.
Well, one of the things that I'm going to be lifting up more and more as I have, these conversations with guests is climate change. And so, which it is a climate emergency. It is. It just really is. And I'm just thinking about the impact on vulnerable populations, which is, the aging population. And we think about, again, housing, food, health and human services needs, this population that some of the populations is already dependent on these services and already vulnerable. I just think about that's just another intersection that is going to impact.
It's a very important one.
A very important one, right? And so this is why LaMonika reminded us we cannot silo ourselves in food. All these things are just going on in my head. Everything that she's saying, y'all,
You can't. It's 91 degrees outside today.
Yes.
It was just under 60 degrees on Friday. Most homes haven't flipped to summarizing their homes yet, which means air conditioners probably haven't been cleaned. They probably need to be cleaned and maintenance needs to be done to make sure that they're not emitting any toxic gas. Filters need to be changed so that allergen and dust particles, that stuff hasn't happened. But when the weather switches like that from 60 to 91, it was instant. It was overnight. When it switches like that, your body has to play catch up. We know how it feels. We call that pneumonia weather.
Yep.
Yesterday I was wearing a jacket and a sweater, and now today I got on sandals and shorts and a tank top because it's hot. That's pneumonia weather.
It really is.
And so when we think about our vulnerable communities, how is that impacting them? If I'm not living in a home that has summarized itself yet, if I'm living in an apartment complex, especially an older building that's not maintained and not taken care of, without proper ventilation, without proper air conditioning, or if I don't have a permanent home at all, the minute the weather gets higher and it gets hotter outside, my food begins to spoil faster because it's warmer inside my house. And if I don't have optimal appliances,
proper storage or
exactly, my food spoils. If I'm an older adult that has mobility issues and I don't have transportation, but I'm having to wait for the bus. And the travel time to and from the grocery store, it's 90 degrees outside. Do you really want someone that is an older adult standing outside waiting for the bus with a cart full of groceries, trying to get to and from home, and then you want them to come home, prepare in a potentially already hot house because the air conditioner isn't working properly? You want them to come home and then properly store those food items and then expect that food to last for a decent amount of time until they're able to get back out to the grocery store. And not to mention, it's warmer outside again. Hot. So the food that is sitting inside of a warehouse, those warehouses are not air conditioned. Typically, you don't have to keep your produce in a refrigerator. When you go to the grocery store, your produce is just sitting out on the shelf. You're sitting out on the store floor. So if it's warmer outside and if it's a farmer's market, for example, the high temperatures are going to cause the food to ripen faster, which means
Greens
that it's going to spoil faster. And so now we get into issues of food waste and the freshness of food.
I'm just throwing my hands up at this point, LaMonika.
There's so many things that you have to think about that it's just and that's just the topic on what does climate change do?
Right, exactly.
That's just climate change. What do we do when it's cold outside? So that temperature, if it wreaks havoc on us, imagine that it's also wreaking havoc on our food, or if we're animal eaters, on the animals that we are eating as well.
Deep breath, everyone.
Our food system's work it's not so simple.
It is not. It's not easy. It's not simple at all. It's very intricate. It's complex, and everyone needs to be at the table. Everyone needs to be at the table.
If you eat, you need to be at the table. And it doesn't matter if you eat veggies, if you are a flexitarian.
Don't matter.
It doesn't matter. If you consume a food on planet Earth, you need to
absolutely
be at the table.
And everything in perspective, it just, for me, just being in a state of gratitude for everything that I have too.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Seriously.
Because there are people that, whether hot or cold, or just, it could be a perfect summer night, doesn't matter. But there are people that don't know where their next meal is coming
Right.
from. There is a child somewhere in DC, I'm pretty sure, that ate breakfast and lunch at school, maybe got a snack before they left for the day, but probably will not eat again
Right.
until they go to school
Back to school.
at 6:30 in the morning. The next day, there's probably a parent somewhere that is not eating so that their child or children can eat. And they don't know when they'll be able to eat again.
Just breaks
But
my
they
heart.
want to make sure that their child or their children has enough to eat. Right here in the nation's
Where we're
capital,
sitting.
where
Yeah.
we're in the middle of, like I like to call it, 8th grade season. There are 8th graders that have descended upon the district.
Yes.
We're in the middle of tourist season. They have no idea
No idea.
what's going on. They have
With
no idea.
so much money in the city.
And that's usually, but everyone's response is, but there's so much money here. People are paid so much. They are, but there's also people that are
Not everybody.
No, those people those tour guides, the folks that you encounter that are keeping the Capitol buildings and your restaurants, your
Hospitality,
servers,
servers.
the folks that you just see, those are DC government employees. Those are DC government employees, unless otherwise noted, where they work for a federal building.
Yeah.
But those are DC employees. The folks at the airport, those are DC employees. And those are the same people that you think are making 6 figures.
They're not. They're not.
They're not.
And things are going up. Housing is going up. Rent is going up. Food is going
Everything
up.
is going up. Not getting cheaper.
No.
No more dollar menu.
See, last time I had LaMonika on the show, I said, LaMonika, we can go down some rabbit holes. We just went down. It wasn't even a deep hole. We're going down a hole. Like this is
Well on our way.
Listen, y'all, if y'all not if you don't want rabbit holes, then
It's really easy.
it's deep. This work is so deep. It's so deep. Well, you had touched on the DC budget, which I just want to ask you a couple more questions about that, and really mainly about how us residents of DC can step up to the plate and shout to our nation. Maybe it's some folks. I get it.
I mean,
right? But really how we can serve to be an advocate for our DC, residents, our communities. But back to the victories, because it's so easy to, which we didn't start off that way. I wanted to start with the victories. So any other victories you want to highlight and anything we should be looking forward to?
Yeah.
We're going to celebrate.
Yeah, of course. There's always good work being done in DC in general, but also in DC Hunger Solutions. We recently published our first iteration of our racial equity report.
Yay, I saw that.
So our
Congrats.
racial equity, thank you. So our racial equity report assesses the racial inequities that exist within the district with
big.
accessing federal programs, but also with food insecurity in general. And so we, again, that not breaking down ourselves, not resting in that silo of food. We also look at all the other barriers to food access or those intersectionalities of food, housing, income, the gender wealth gap, all these different pieces and layers that are connected to food. We break all that down. And then looking at that across the district. What does this look like in Ward 7 and 8, east of Anacostia, compared to Ward 5 or Ward 1 or Ward 3? And so it really does it's the first time that we've ever done a report that really takes a dive into what are the racial inequities that exist in the district.
Wow.
What are some of the recommendations which continue to fund the Food Access Fund, continue to make sure that we fund Give, Snap, or Raise, the Pay Equity Fund, Nourish DC Collaborative, making sure that we're, continuously doing a study and providing funding to organizations that are situated in Ward 7 and 8, but also organizations just in general across the district that support our communities of color. So that was one
That's awesome.
area.
Any pause there, if I can pause there. Are there any high level, I guess, takeaways or bullets from this racial equity report that kind of just stick out the most, or just things that you want to tap into? Or I
Within
know
the
it's extensive.
Yeah. I think the one thing that it's just a reminder, and I'd have to pull out just our just facts,
Yeah.
because I don't have them all off the top of my head. But the one thing is just it's a reminder of the disparities that exist, where people think that they do not exist, where
Ooh, okay.
people continue to use this phantom excuse that stigmas are not real. Stigmas are absolutely real. The
Very.
disparities are absolutely real. And just also, while great things are being done in DC, there's still so much more work that needs to be done. I think one of the things that I was most intrigued by was our conversation on the redistricting
Okay.
and how redlining has impacted
Oh my
the
goodness.
district.
Yes.
The district underwent redistricting in 2021. And so just what does that look like compared to other parts of DC? Why is it that Ward 7 and 8 continuously and historically, particularly Ward 8,
Right.
but why is it that these communities are continuously impacted negatively by disparities? Why do they continue to experience less grocery stores? Why is the highest number of our SNAP and WIC participants? Why are they number one communities of color? But why are they communities of color, people of color that live east of the Anacostia? What is it that we can do? Funding organizations that are situated intently in Ward 7 and 8 or in Anacostia to address the disparities. And so looking at just those boundary lines and that redistricting and housing practices and, knowing that I think I was watching something came across TV the other day. And it was a woman that was talking about how I believe she lives in Ward 8. She's always lived in Ward 8. But next to her house was this open field. And it's been an open field since she was a small girl. And it's not a massive area, but it's a nice plot of land that if you grew up in this house, this is a field that me and my friends can play in. Not that big. It's not that big. It's just enough for a couple kids to play in, but it's still an open green space, which is important for climate.
Yep.
It's important for our environmental reasons. But they built a skinny house, and she was upset because it now blocks out her light, and there's no sunshine that comes through in her apartment.
Look at that.
And the house, I believe, is something like $700,000 or something like that. But it's a slim house. It's a very narrow home. And she was upset about it.
As she should have been.
And yeah, as she should have been. As she should have been. And so the report talks about things like that. So without having it in front of me to pull out,
I'm so excited
it goes into
that.
all of that. Gender, wealth gap, income that women are making, specifically Black women compared to white women. What else there's just all those intersectionalities. So I think the one on housing is the one that just kind of grasped me.
Okay.
We also talk a lot about transportation, the limited number of metro stops east of the river compared to other parts of the district, and how difficult it is for a lot of folks to catch a Lyft or an Uber in those areas versus being in other parts.
Yeah.
And some of it is just strictly due to how far away those areas are from maybe our downtown area.
Yeah.
So it goes into all of that.
And I am appreciative of all the food champions and change makers and even farmers. I was actually listening to a clip earlier today. Thank you all for just continuing to bring up redlining into these conversations.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And if you have not read it, or if you're not familiar with it, a really great book to read is The Color of Law.
I've read it.
Have you read it?
It is a great book. I need to read it 2 times over.
Yeah.
It's a great book.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. There was also a movie that came on Amazon called Them, I think is the name of the movie.
Not familiar.
So it's a a thriller / horror film.
Okay.
But the premise of the movie is a black family moves into a white neighborhood at the end of Vietnam, I believe.
Okay.
And it talks about how how redlining was the issue. It talks about white flight, and then what happens when, black families begin to move into white neighborhoods, and, how are you able to do this?
Right.
So that's a movie that was on Amazon, but it talks about, black soldiers receiving a GI bill or not receiving a GI bill
Yep.
to purchase their homes. But that's how these soldiers were able to purchase their homes. And the white soldiers were able to purchase their homes and move into the suburbs because they had this GI Bill, but our black soldiers weren't given the same thing.
This is all historical
horror
issues.
And this movie is set in the 50s or 60s.
Yeah,
and
of
so this
course.
isn't stuff that, I'm sure it's happening undercover today through our
Absolutely.
redistricting, but these are things that were openly done and nobody was trying to hide back in the 50s and 60s. And that's a lot of the reason why we're here today. And that's what what the report talks about. It brings a historical knowledge into racial inequities, specifically in DC, and how we got to where we are, and then the recommendations for eradicating those inequities.
That's awesome. I can't wait to dig in.
Yeah.
No pun intended. I'm sorry I cut you off because I'm telling you, when I have LaMonika in the studio, she goes in and I love it. You are a book. I'm waiting for your book. I don't know what that looks like.
She don't either. She don't either. I've written one.
Oh,
and everybody's
okay.
like, when is the next one? I've written one and I had something to say. I
need a case study out of you, like published by something. I know you've had your hands in a lot of stuff, but there's something else brewing. I'm not trying to put more on you. LaMonika, it can be 10 years from now. I'm just saying.
I don't know. We got to figure out what it is. I'm sure somewhere when I have a chance to rest my brain, something will say, ooh, you need to take a dive into that. And you really need to uncover, let's have some deep conversation.
Yes.
But until then, I will lean on others.
Listen.
And read their books.
Listen.
So.
All right. So the study, and I think you were going to mention something else. We were talking about victories.
So we had the racial equity report, and then last week we released our inaugural early childhood nutrition report.
Okay.
And so that assesses the access to early childhood nutrition programs, so birth to pre-K, highlighting specifically CACFP, which is the Child and Adult Food Care Program, and then NWIC. So what advancements we can make now with that one. I can share that we've Child Care Aware put out some data that we utilize for the report, that we have a high number of child care centers. I think there's close to 500 child care centers and daycare homes in DC, but only 33%. Yeah, there's a high number, but only 33% participate in the CACFP.
Really?
So I know some of that is due to operating CACFP. There's a lot of administrative burden that people experience. There's a lot of paperwork associated with that. And so we work really closely with OSSI to kind of dispel some of those questions, some of the issues. What are some ways in which we can support our child care centers and daycare homes so they can participate and they can receive the benefits not just from CACFP, but also from Healthy Tots. So Healthy Tots is legislation that we led on, we being DC, led on, which allows for a third meal in CACFP. So CACFP at the federal level is 2 meals and a snack. DC pays for a third meal.
Okay.
And so you get an additional incentive, number one, for participating in CACFP. You get an additional meal. There's also some additional incentives for serving a local meal component as part of your meal that you offer. So the more people that we have, more centers and daycare homes that we have participating in the Child and Adult Food Care Program, the more funding we can allocate to the Healthy Tots Act, which means that's the more funding that we can put towards increasing the health outcomes for birth to pre-K, which is a precursor to them getting to kindergarten. So, early childhood nutrition and health and wellness and development and all those things are imperative before a child even gets to kindergarten. So this report just lays out all of that and recommendations. I think one of the recommendations that we have in there Again, the Pay Equity Fund was huge. The Pay Equity Fund, for those that don't know, increases the pay for our early childhood educators.
Okay.
And so DC was a leader in that, and this was legislation that was advocated for heavily and was funded, but then ultimately stripped in this year's budget. But we have it, the Early Pay Educators Fund. We also have the WIC food packaging, which on the federal level has now been revised, as well as some other, I think, increasing funding for Healthy Tots Act, which is directly correlated to increased participation in CACFP as well.
Okay.
And we'll also support our Farm to ECE, or our Farm to Early Care and Education program. So that report came out last Thursday, I think. Yeah, last Thursday was the 25th. So last Thursday. So we're really excited about pushing that out and amplifying pieces within that. And then looking forward, we have our annual grocery store report that'll come out sometime in the fall, early fall.
Okay.
It came out in August last year, but we'll get some updates. There's been some changes and some shifts with grocery store access this year, so really excited to get that out. But that's our annual report that we put out.
Man, oh man, oh man. That's a lot.
It is a lot. I have a dynamic team of folks
Yes.
that I am extremely proud of, that do a lot of hard work. The one question I'm getting lately is, how many people actually work for DC Hunger Solutions? Y'all act like there's about 30. I feel like everybody asks, how many people work there?
Sound like it's 100 of y'all there.
We working with a solid 7.
Oh my God.
A solid 7, from outreach in the community to SNAP 101 trainings to working with our older adults to planning summer meals, kickoff events with OSSI and other partners, to our coalition work. You can't do this work if you're not passionate about it. And I don't know if my passion pours over onto my staff, but they're passionate all within themselves. And I think that's how we're able to keep the machine going, and the work of those that come before us. Is through our passion and dedicating. We really just dedication. We really do just want to help folks. That's it.
Absolutely.
We just want to make it better. That's it.
Wow. Well, I felt your passion the last time we spoke, which was the first time that I met you. So thank you for your leadership, because I know it has a really great impact on your team. So a small but mighty team. 7. That's a lot of outputs. 7, but you said 7 solid folks, so that's key.
Oh, well, yeah, there's whether you're an intern. I consider anyone that's an intern, if you're a Vista, if you're a fellow, you're a staff.
You put in work.
You're a staff. We not here just to have, people say that they do the work. Like, no, if you're going to be a part of the team, you're a part of the team, you're a part of the family. That means, you're here. We know what we're working on. We got some outcomes, and even if you're here for a limited time, if it's just 6 weeks, 10 weeks, 2 weeks, it doesn't matter. Like, there's an impact that you can make, and we want to make sure that you can do that, and you're here for a reason.
I know that's right. Well, we had talked about, you had dipped into, and as we wrap up, some of the challenges with the budget, and which that can be a whole nother episode and rabbit hole. But you all have heard from LaMonika some of the funding that has been cut, unfortunately. I want to know, how can residents and advocates effectively voice their concerns and recommendations regarding these issues? Budget initiatives that folks don't want to move on. How can we be a part of the solution? And just as an everyday resident wanting to help, because, everyone, these necessities that it's a basic human right. And everyone deserves to have food in their home. Everybody deserves to have a home. Everybody deserves to have transportation. How can we play a small part to a very big problem?
Yeah.
Big challenge, I'll say. Big challenge.
Yeah. So the most immediate impact, the last day, and I don't know I think maybe 2 days before the hearing you can sign up, but I'm not sure if it's signing up is closed. I'm not sure.
Okay.
But you can sign up to testify at the final budget hearing, at the committee of the whole hearing on Friday, May 3rd.
Okay.
Now it's slated to be a marathon day because it's the last hearing, so a lot of folks testifying. But if you can't provide live testimony, and that testimony can be either live in council chambers or you can do it via Zoom. If you can't do either one of those, you can absolutely submit written testimony.
Okay.
So the most immediate thing, number one, I would say is submit testimony. And if anyone needs budget ask, recommendations, like what are the recommendations, I can share with you our policy priorities. I can also share with you the policy priorities of Fair Budget Coalition, which is not just food, but it is a host of other areas, including taxes, economic justice, health equity, safety. There's a lot of policy priorities there. And I think also DC Fiscal Policy Institute probably has broken down some particular areas that are tailored towards supporting our Black and Brown residents.
Okay.
So submitting that written testimony is number one. Outside of a typical budget season, when there's not a lot of movement, there's always bills that are being passed and legislation that's being passed. So DC Council is always working. Anytime your council member has any open office hours, like I think Chairman Mendelson, excuse me,
It's all
has
good.
Mondays with Mendo.
Mondays with
Mendo.
Okay.
And so sometimes they're in person, sometimes they're on Facebook, sometimes they're just various places. That's your opportunity to connect with various council members on what issues are important to them. You can ask them a question. I think their goal is for them to hang out and to learn more about their constituents. But it's an opportunity for you to learn, well, what bills are on the table? All of our council members either sit on a committee or oversee a committee. And so what's going on with your committee? What are, some of the top issues that the committee is tapping into? And so making sure that you know your council member, you talk to your council member, anytime that there is a hearing, a committee hearing, even down to scheduling office hours if you just want to meet with them. I have an issue. I live in Ward 5, for example, and there's this one traffic light that is out, but this traffic light is across the street from my child's school, and it's dark outside in the winter, and it's cold, and so whatever the issue may be, this is something that is important to you. And so make it important to your council member. They don't know unless you tell them.
Right.
So set up a time to meet with them, regardless of what the issue is. They're here to represent you. And the conversations that I've had with the council members, they're always receptive and wanting to learn, especially because they can't be everywhere and talk to everyone.
Yeah.
And so they want to learn. So outside of a budget season, schedule time with your council members, even the at-large members, which work on broader issues. Find out just what's on their table, what's on their plate, and give them space to learn from you. Outside of that, we have mutual aids.
Okay.
Where you want to, and I know I get a lot of emails from Ward 5 mutual aid, from Ward 6 mutual aid. I just met someone from, I think she was in Ward 7 mutual aid. But connect with mutual aid. These are groups that are working directly to provide resources to the folks that live in their given ward. So find out who that is. Connect with them. What resources, what need is there? Is it providing, do you have a high number of older adults in your ward or a high number of Spanish-speaking families in your ward, and there's specific resources that they need? Connect with the mutual aid to find out what those are and see how you can support. So, it's not always the great big, I need to, do something grand. Sometimes it really is just as small as attending a coalition meeting, a PTA meeting, to find out what's the need in the school that my child goes to, and connect with some folks to find out, oh, wow, I didn't know your child deals with blah, blah, blah.
Right,
like, we should come together with other parents because there's parents at a neighboring school that deal with blah, blah, blah. We should come together and
showing up
create something.
And being able,
Just showing up usually
Just like
has
you showed up to my live podcast event, and now
all I did was show up, sit in the back, drink that bomb lemonade that I was like,
shout out to Green Things Works, the
this
chlorophyll lemonade.
is good. I was like, what? And I'm not even a potato chip person,
Oh, their house-made chips are really good.
but wherever those chips came from, I said, this was a really good
They make them
surprise
in-house here at the
snack
line.
for
Yep.
an afternoon. I said, okay.
I like to think of my guests. I like to. If there's a small way I can spoil guests, I definitely like to do it. So
that chlorophyll lemonade was that was delicious. So, but yeah, those are some ways that residents can absolutely show up.
very helpful, very helpful. Because it's one thing to, share your disagreements and share, and not necessarily disagreements, just share how you're feeling about an issue and what is right and what isn't right. But what are some of the ways we can move towards a solution, and how can we support? So it is show up. And let's try to do some collective building. And like you said, you might meet someone who may have who are facing some of the similar issues that you're facing, and just the power of connecting with people and raising your voice. It goes such a long way.
Yeah, we all have more in common than what we think.
You're absolutely right about that.
Just because we disagree on how our tax money is spent
Yeah.
doesn't mean that we can't come together for food issues. Doesn't mean that we can't come together to support the returning citizens or older adults. There may be some nuances within that, but we can absolutely come together. We're people. We're people. I would think that we would not think exactly the same all the time.
Yeah.
Then we would be robots.
We certainly would be. LaMonika, thank you so much. This has been amazing. I feel like I need you as like a correspondent, like every month to drop in.
Like we need to create some segments where we do, I don't know.
These updates are very, extremely important. I know my conversations are, obviously I interview an array of folks, growers, gardeners, who all contribute to this food system. But all of this is connected, and especially like the policy and the funding, it affects everyone.
It affects everyone.
It affects everyone, which again, we cannot be siloed in one thing.
No,
and certainly not just in food. So
no, because if you're talking about farmers and growers, we're talking about food, because they have a literal hand in our food system. But we're also talking about economic justice.
Absolutely.
How much am I being paid as a farmer? How much am I able to sell my products for? And then the stipulations around being a farmer in DC and having to register as a business, a small business, a business of color that sells fresh food, that doesn't sell widgets.
Yep.
There's stipulations around that. So, yeah, definitely a lot of intersectionalities.
Ooh, I have one last question for you. One final question for you. So, as some of you might know, as I mentioned before, I did the live podcast event as a way to continue to celebrate Black women, growers and farmers and agriculturalists and food activists, right? And I'm calling it homegrown. And so in the spirit of homegrown, I wanted to ask you, LaMonika, what does homegrown mean to you as it relates to how you're rooted in this work? And there's no perfect answer.
Jeez. Such a heavy question. What does homegrown mean to me?
And it could be how you're rooted in this work, or just in general when it comes to family, and because I know part of the last time you came, you shared a bit of your story with your dad and how he taught you a lot. So
I feel like that's what homegrown is. It is being true to the core of who you are.
Yes.
when we're talking about this work, knowing what your why is, I always lead with that. Doing this work because, and this is just me, doing this work just because you have a degree in it isn't always, may not be the best route. In the same way that just because you have a math degree that you should be a teacher.
Right.
That doesn't necessarily mean that that's the route you should take. But in this space, being an advocate, leading on anti-hunger, on food access, providing training and technical assistance, just teaching people about food systems, understand your why. And I think it's being willing to stick to who you are, what's central to who you are, what's the framework that you operate within, and centering yourself.
Yeah.
Like, I may not know everything, I may not know everyone, but I'm being true to who I am, and I'm being real that
By the end of the day.
at the end of the day, I can go home and say, if I did anything right today, it was I stuck true to who I am and the core of who I am.
Amen to that.
And I know who I am. Like, one thing I always say to people, if there's anything you can say about LaMonika, I'm always solid.
I love it.
I love
a solid person.
I'm always solid.
I wouldn't have invited you back if I didn't think you were solid.
In the words, I think I mentioned him last time, Nipsey.
Nipsey,
Ten toes down. 10 toes down. I'm always going to be solid.
I know that's right.
I'm always going to be solid. You can always count on me to show up as LaMonika and be LaMonika. And that's because I know who I am. I know whose I am.
Amen.
I know why I'm here. And I'm passionate about the people that I serve.
I love that. My final question. Are there any particular one person or a couple, who are some of the Black women in the food activism space you wish to lift up?
There's so many people that
I know, right?
that have helped me. I've had the pleasure in food and nutrition to be surrounded by some amazing Black women who are passionate. From my first supervisor working at a state agency in Georgia, who told me, and I share this advice with others, she told me, there's nothing you can do to mess this up. There's nothing you can do. We can always fix it. There's nothing you can do. She had lived experience having an autistic daughter and having to learn how to provide, to feed her daughter, to kind of treat her autism. So she used having a chronic disease, if that's what I'm not sure if that's the correct terminology, but she treated her daughter's autism, but with healthy foods.
Okay.
That was kind of like her offset to make sure she was getting, but that also was her foray into federal nutrition programs. She has a knowledge of federal programs that is just mind-boggling.
Wow.
From her to Dr. Kari Cotright, who's also from Georgia. She's now an appointee within USDA, leading nutrition and health equity. She's dynamic at the grassroots level in teaching on the importance of nutrition education, health equity, and now she's working within USDA. And I think somebody that everybody is very familiar with in DC, who gave me my start in DC, Dr. Beverly Wheeler.
Yes.
I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up Beverly every time that I had an opportunity to. Because when I first came to DC, and DC Hunger Solutions was the reason why I moved to the district, her ability to let me voice concerns, issues, but express with creativity how to eradicate hunger and poverty, and to do so from the perspective of a person of color, but to give me that freedom to, however we need to do it, we'll do it. But also knowing that she set a foundation as a native Washingtonian. She set a foundation. Like I always tell people, Beverly knows something. She knows something everybody. Like I think she knows everybody in DC and everybody knows her. So to be counted as someone who worked closely with her and who, in my eyes, was mentored by her and to have sat underneath her and then to be her legacy is a tremendous honor in DC. So those are probably the ones. I mean, I think we all know, Fannie Lou Hamer, and we all know Shirley Chisholm, the folks that get me excited about let's take this thing to the hill.
I love that, though. It's very important for me that people who are solid doing this work, the ones who aren't typically heard and seen, and that we lift their names up, because there's so many people doing really, 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 really great work, right? Yes. And some of the names that you shouted, some folks may not know, and I want to continue to lift their names, because they, again, is more than just the farmers and the growers. It's the policymakers, and it's
I'll never forget Miss Starks. She was in my church. She was the church kitchen. I'll never forget sitting in church growing up. We all knew who Miss Starks was. And when you start smelling that Sunday dinner, when you in a sanctuary, you knew Miss Starks was in the kitchen making something. And during the week, she made sure that the folks that worked in the office were fed. Even it's down to
that,
to the older woman that, excuse me, she may be making sure that you have a snack when you come. If it's your grandmother, I will never forget. Never, ever forget. I grew up in a household where if we did eat breakfast, it wasn't because my mom didn't want us to or my dad didn't want us to. It was because we just didn't eat breakfast during the school days or during the school week. And so we grew up in a cereal household.
I did too.
There was no grits and eggs. And on a Tuesday, what? It was a cereal 7 days a week in my house.
Oh, God.
But I had to spend the week with my grandmother 1 week because my parents went out of town. And my grandmother got up every single day. We had grits, we had eggs, we had bacon, we had biscuits, and she said, it's cold outside. You got to put something on your bones.
Where you got to have something.
You got to put something on your
cold
bones.
Cereal.
Hated that we always wanted Frosted Flakes in the morning. Hated it. So
Grandma gonna make sure.
that grandma love is something different.
It is so
grandma love
different.
I used to swear up and down the bread at my grandma's house was different than the bread at my house.
It is. Because it's all her love and energy that's just slapping that loaf.
You couldn't tell me that Wonder Bread at my grandma's house that sat on her kitchen table wasn't the softest butter bread that you have ever had in your life. And let my parents buy some Wonder Bread.
It don't taste the same.
It don't taste the same. So, yeah, grandmas are special. But those are all important. Every corner that you touch, we often talk about school breakfast and amplify the work of the Black Panthers for instituting and pioneering school breakfast. It's that, realizing that kids can't go to school on an empty stomach.
Right.
So it's not just the folks that you know, but it's those folks that you will never, ever see, that you'll never, ever interact with, that have the most impact. You'll never see them.
Never. Exactly. Thank you, LaMonika. This has been a pleasure.
Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
I enjoy my time with you. I learned so much.
I agree.
Told you I don't need to say much. Like, LaMonika just comes in, starts, flipping these pages in this book, and I'm just like, okay.
I don't know. Maybe it's because I talk too much.
No. Very, very, direct and just boatload of knowledge, and just very, very important to food system work.
Thank you.
And I want folks to listen to it, tap into it, and hear all the different spokes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, y'all. Thank you so much for tuning in. You can catch today's episode on iTunes, Spotify, and Full Service Radio. Peace.